Well, I've no idea what this pair are looking at, but I've just watched The Crow Salvation, directed by Barrett Naluri, written by Chip Johansson, and very loosely based upon the works of James O'Barr. As you can tell behind me, it stars Kirsten Dunst and Eric Mabius, as well as William Atherton, Walter Peck himself, Walton Goggins, Fred Ward, and Dale Midkiff, who will always be Lewis Creed to me, which is interesting considering this video is two films talked about in one. I'll do this one first, and then The Crow Wicked Prayer will come later on. I've got a few things to say about this, but not too much, and I think with Wicked Prayer it's literally going to be, don't watch this. But Eric Mabius is known to me thanks to the Resident Evil film franchise, specifically the first one. And like with this, he's likeable. I think he seems a nice guy from everything I've seen, but I just can't rate him as an actor. There's nothing different in this performance than in Resident Evil. It's very much one note, and yeah, there are moments in this that I think he shines. Some of the one-liners are well delivered, but I just don't think his overall performance is much to talk about. Some of that could be direction, some of it could be script. I'm not going to say, but there are people here who are clearly doing a much better job with the work, so the script and direction is only going to take some of the flack. And yes, I'm comparing him with stuff like Fred Ward and William Atherton. Bit of a big ask there, but still, even some of the lesser known ones are seemingly doing better. I do want to like him though in this role, and one thing I really appreciate this is it does something very different. Yeah, corrupt cops are a staple of anything these days pretty much, and it's not changed in the last 20 some years. Tying the Crow in to that worked to a degree. I do think there's a lot of stuff here though that they just leaned on what came before. There's moments where it goes, we'll do something different, and then it just gets lazy. The fact that we have an ending that involves him losing his powers, and in a really stupid way. Finding a fake arm with the scar or the implants, the Crow or the source of the power, whatever it may be, would know that that's not real. So he wouldn't lose his power. That's never been a thing, as far as I'm aware, in any material. That believing that the job's done is enough. Because if that was the case, literally any Crow in the past could have gone, I think I'm done, and be over. So I really don't agree with that. I just think they wanted to bring in the loss of power, and it was the only way they could actually figure out to make it work, and I say make it work very loosely here. This is definitely a film that tried something, and I will always respect that, but it just does not land at all. And there's moments that I'm guessing or second guessing what's going on in a way, because, and the captain references it as well, there's two specific instances where collateral damage does not seem to be taken into account, and this is not, again, something that the Crow, as I understand it, would agree to or would be willing to do if there was any other way around it. There's a moment where he blows up the car of one of the corrupt police officers. Caught in the blast is a police helicopter. Now, okay, the argument of just following orders has a lot of connotations throughout history that are less than ideal, but they were still not part of the original thing. We can't assume, I know the ACAB thing is a thing now, but we can't assume that those in the helicopter knew what was going on and were party to it. They were sent out there by their superiors to do a job. And with the Key Club, there's a lot of people in there who are probably collateral as well. The Crow does not do collateral damage. It's the one thing of this film that really made me question if they understood what they were doing. I was very close to throwing up, and that isn't hyperbole at all. I was very uncomfortable with the Dutton traffic stop with the two girls. I am glad that it was curtailed when it was, but also what we found out about the Weinsteins, or at least Harvey in particular, does make this scene very difficult to watch now. I'd almost want a cut that doesn't include it, but it is important for the plot. It is important because it enables Alex to come in. And yeah, he does get a wonderful one-liner of, "You're up," to the girl who was passed out. I love that delivery. Again, like I say, Eric Mabius does have moments like that. But overall, this film tried something, and it doesn't hit most of it. It certainly isn't, I think, a worthy entry into the Crow series. But there are elements that I like more than City of Angels, and I think I'm on the verge of having to talk about Wicked Prayer because I really have not much more to say for this. So I hope you'll join me when my backdrop changes in a second to talk about The Crow Wicked Prayer. As promised, new backdrop, and we're talking about The Crow Wicked Prayer in part 2 of this video because, yeah, I didn't want to do a whole video on this. I really did not want to watch it even. This was directed by Lance Mangia, who co-wrote the screenplay with Sean Hood and Jeff Most, who is a common thread with these films, mostly working in the music department. I can't say 100% that all the problems with this are because he moved to screenwriting, but if they were, then I really hope that nothing else was ever done in that field by him. It was based on a novel by Norman Partridge, and of course, like all the others, based on the works of James O'Barr, although I would say this is much more loosely than any of the others. As you can tell, it stars Edward Furlong, but also we have Tara Reid. Marcus Chong got dragged into this, like poor Tank from The Matrix. And Macy Gray appears, although you could blink and miss her almost. And then we've got the 3Ds, Danny Trejo, Dennis Hopper, and one of the highlights of the entire film, David Boreanaz. I'm sorry, Mr. Furlong, he was much better than you. But still, yes, I sat through this, I endured it for this video, and this is a lot more of a Western feel than the others, and I could see it working. I mean, we have the character of the Skull Cowboy, so why not? The Crow is a Western, good idea, in theory. But it just doesn't live up to the promise. But because it's that kind of theme, I'm going to take it to as kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good, like I said, David Boreanaz is the absolute highlight. You cannot tell me otherwise. He is chewing every bit of scenery he can get his teeth into, and for a lot of it, it's basically Angelus. Normally I'd say that was a bad thing, but in a film like this, I'm much happier. I really think that him leaning into that is what made this less hard for me to sit through. What else good? No, I'm out. So the bad. Pretty much everything else. Like, Edward Furlong I thought was fine in T2. Like I said in the previous part of this video, he is the kind of common thread with Dale Midkiff because he was in the sequel to Pet Sematary, which is also not very good. I mean, the guy seems decent enough for the most part. He's had issues, but who in Hollywood hasn't? And he obviously just, picks up what work he can, like a lot of actors do. I can't fault him for that. I don't know that much of the bad of this is his fault. I think he did okay with what he had to work with, like everyone here. But the whole thing could just not exist and I'd be a lot happier. There is just so little to praise that, like I say, the rest of the film is the bad. The ugly, I don't want to tread over this ground in a way because I'm not from the right background, but I can't let it slide. El Nino, the character, is, obviously it's a Spanish-based name, but the dialogue, the clothing is the, unfortunately, stereotypical pimp thing. But there's very much an AAVE/Ebonics field to, or way of speaking that he has. And I almost feel like Dennis Hopper was maybe we can't get anyone we want, so he'll do, or some weird whitewashing kind of casting. I don't understand it. This is clearly not meant to be an old white guy. Because there are people who live in neighborhoods where a lot of African American people have lived, and they've grown up with AAVE as just what they hear, always. The accents that we grow up with, for example, we don't put them on, we don't make them happen, it's just how we learn to speak, how we learn to make the sounds. I would be totally fine if it was a younger guy who you could maybe argue had grown up in a black dominant neighborhood. He'd pick up AAVE naturally that way, fine. I'd accept that. Even someone of, I don't know what the right word is, Hispanic or Latin, someone, please correct me, I never like to use the wrong term if I can avoid it, but still, whatever it would be, again, if they're in the same environments, they might have picked it up organically. But this is an older guy. He hasn't grown up with it. This is adoption and, I guess, appropriation, for want of a better word. It's one of the worst bits of the film, and that's saying a lot. It really rubbed me the wrong way. Okay, it wasn't as bad as something I talked about in Salvation, but still. In a film this bad, do everything you can to avoid making it worse. But yeah, I don't want to spend more time on it. I think that's it. It picks up the wrong bits. I mean, these lines on his face are just done in Sharpie. It's not paint. I mean, I didn't mention in Salvation's bit about the fact that it was mystical because of the burns, etc. But even that was better than just Sharpieing it on because of a costume you wore once. I mean, okay, the original was a fool's mask, etc. But it's like they want to keep the look and they're doing everything they can to shoehorn it in. No, thank you. Just skip this one. In fact, skip most of them. I would say watch the original and pretend that that's where it ended. Although there are some schools of thought that say that the series was a more worthy successor. That is the sequel. It's been a while since I've watched it, and like I said, I'm not going to cover it for this Halloween run. That's not going to be next week's surprise video at the end. That's something I've been wanting to do for a while. But I may cover it either at some point down the line, if not Halloween next year. Maybe like revisit this, see if the remake's out by then. It probably won't be, but the fan film I certainly do think I need to have a look at. And of course, the second coming cut, the fan edit of the sequel, City of Angels. But as it stands, yes, this is my Crow coverage at an end. Thank you once again to James for joining me on the first one. But like I said, next week is not Crow related. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while, but then I put it off to tie in with the 30th anniversary, and I'm so excited for it. It was such a formative thing for me growing up when I was 9.5. So I hope you join me for that and you've enjoyed this Crow run. Let me know if you want me to cover everything else Crow related, or I always say any suggestions are welcome. Please feel free to put them in comments, etc. And as always, until next time, thank you for watching, take care, and don't watch any of the Crow sequels.